So welcome to Build Your Website with WordPress, part 2. And today's panelist is Nathan Smith, and he's a digital literacy specialist with CALS. And for those of you out of the Central Arkansas area, that's the Central Arkansas Library System. So take it away, Nathan. Take us through part 2.
All right, let's do this. So, hey everybody, as he said, I'm Nathan Smith. I am the digital literacy specialist for the Central Arkansas Library System. I teach a bunch of technology classes, and you know, I'm happy to have you anytime. Of course, you can head to you can head to cals.org/tech-classes if you want to check those out. But let's go ahead and get it rolling. Okay, so what we've got, I have I've got my web browser open, and I've got the web address that we're going to need to use up at the top here. Oh, just to say this again, I said it at the beginning of the last session, but just to reiterate, if you are if you've got a situation where you're not 100% sure that if you either only have sort of one screen to work on and to watch the webinar, you know, if you happen to have a smartphone handy, you can pull up the webinar on this, and you can kind of watch along while you're working on your computer, or you can watch along later with the recorded version of this and just watch what I'm doing for now, you know, and then follow along later on. So whatever works for you is fine. I'm going to kind of talk as though folks are doing what I'm doing, but if for some reason you were to fall behind, or if you needed to circle back later, then please feel free to do that. That's one of the virtues of having this recorded, is you can review it later and you can catch things you missed and so on. Okay, so let's do this. I've got, I have my web browser open. What I've done is I've gone ahead and typed in the address that I need to go to in order to get to the back end of my website. So that's the address of my website. For the our example for this particular class is CALS ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com. So the address of my website, and then I add a /, again, backslashes never used in a web address, /wp-admin. And when I press enter after getting that typed in, then that is going to take me to the dashboard of my site. Now, if you're on a different machine than you used last time, or if you logged out at the end of yesterday's session or at some point, or you're using a different web browser, WordPress might pop up, or WordPress.com, I should say, might pop up and prompt you to sign in. If it does, no big deal. Just use the same sign-in information that you used yesterday. All right, so I'm in the back end here in the dashboard, and you can use this. You can also use the dashboard here to change various settings on your site. I'm mostly going to use the My Site or My Sites menu that are specific to WordPress.com because with the way that WordPress.com is set up, that's a little bit easier than using the dashboard for everything. But again, all of these options may be located in a slightly different place or may look slightly different, but they work pretty much exactly the same. Okay, so for today's session, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on adding content to your site, and that can take a number of different forms. So we're going to start with posts, and well, we'll start with a static page, then we'll move on and we'll create a quick blog post as well, and then we'll talk about embedding content too. And along the way, we're going to be uploading some media, so we'll talk about the media browser as we move forward as well. So let's dive into that. So the first thing we're going to do is create a page. I'm going to click on the My Sites menu or button up here, or My Site button if you've only got one so far. That's perfectly fine. Excuse me. And then here on the page, I'm going to go down and find Site over on the left-hand side, and I'll click on Pages. All right. So on this particular list of pages, we've got a bunch of things here. There's already an About page that was built for me when I created my page. I'm actually going to take a look at that just briefly with you, and then we'll build our own here in a moment. So these 4 items in the list here, these are those static pages. I mentioned yesterday that there are 2 different types of web pages essentially that are part of your WordPress site. One of those types of pages is the static page. So my home page that I have here, the About page, the Contact page, and to a certain extent the blog, although that's kind of a different animal. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week when we deal with the customizer. But these 3 definitely have kind of a similar setup going on here. And so the static pages are designed to host, you might say, timeless content, things that are not going to change that often, like, say, for example, your location and your hours of business, or the history of your organization, or what kind of what kinds of services you offer, things like that. They're things that aren't going to change that much, and so you want to make sure that they're there and very convenient for your audience, your visitors, to access. Blog posts, on the other hand, contain, you might say, timely information that that's probably very relevant at the time you post it, but may or may not be terribly interesting in a few months' time. So things like upcoming sales at your store, or your position on the latest developments in whatever the political climate is, or whatever the case may be. Anything that you want to communicate, if it's something like that, or if it's a piece of what you might generally term content, something like, for example, a thing that tells you how to do a certain task around your home, your visitors, how to do a certain task around their home, or if you are if you were, say, a freelance video editor, like, here are some basic editing techniques that you might find useful, or things like that. All of that stuff would be something you would put under, or that you would make as a blog post. So let's look at one of these pages. I'm going to click on this About page over here, and we'll check it out. Get my little cookie warning out of the way. Okay, so that takes me to the editor. You can see the little controls for the editor up at the top here. And mine doesn't have a little sidebar anymore, probably because I accidentally clicked that at the end of yesterday's session, I think. But if yours doesn't have a little sidebar, you can click this little gear. So the reason that I jumped in to show you this existing page rather than just starting from complete scratch is to kind of show you, like, how pages are created in WordPress. WordPress has gone through a change in the last couple of years in this area, specifically the editor. Back in the day, a couple of years ago or a little more, the editor for your content, for your pages and your posts, hadn't really changed that much in years and years and years and years and years from back when WordPress was pretty much strictly blogging software. And so now, but now as things have gotten more interesting, HTML has developed, and the web is a lot more flexible in a lot of ways. WordPress upgraded the editor experience to this new version of the editor that they call Guttenberg. So if you have WordPress 5.0 or later, then you should be able to access Guttenberg. And the way it works is your content is divided up into these different, what they call blocks. So if you look at this, you'll notice I have a few blocks that are pre-added here to this about page as an example. So there's an outer block here, which is your layout grid block. Basically, the idea behind this block is you can take pieces of content, and you can see there's like there are these little gray bars here, these columns. You can take content and you can basically lay it out according to this grid, so that you can so that things will be spaced out appropriately throughout this section. Then there are a few blocks inside of this. There's this block here, the image block, this block here, which is the heading block, and this block here, which is the paragraph block. Blocks are basically little pieces of content that are all the same type of thing that you move together. So a heading block contains just a heading on your page somewhere. A paragraph block contains a paragraph of text. Now you would think it might contain, if your text is several paragraphs long, which normally that's a pretty reasonable thing you might expect. If your text is several paragraphs long, then you might be concerned about kind of losing the, or then you might think, oh, well, this is also a paragraph, so it goes inside the paragraph block. No, actually, each paragraph needs to be inside its own little section, its own little block. But what that allows you to do is, if you need to reorder your content for some reason, you can just drag it around. And since everything is blocks, it can all flow together in different ways, depending on how you want to lay out your page, and also what kind of device your visitors are using to view your site. So that matters a great deal when sometimes you're visiting a website on your computer, sometimes you're visiting on your phone, sometimes you're using your tablet, or whatever kind of device you might end up using to access your site. You want it to look good on whatever. So, so if I wanted to, for example, let's say, put this heading below the other, all I need to do is either use these arrows here or drag it around. So I'm going to use the arrows this time, hold down on that, or click on that down arrow, and now the text here moves on top of my, paragraph of text moves on top of my heading there. So, so that's all I need to do to rearrange it. I could even drag it down here outside of the grid block if I want to. And now, for some reason, it went up, but that's okay, whatever. There we go. Okay, so let's start out with our own. We are actually going to make a different kind of about page. So let's dig into that. Since I've made some changes and this page was already existing page, I can have a couple of different options here. Up at the top, if I wanted to save the changes to the page, which I don't, but if I wanted to save the changes to the page, I could just click update right here at the top, and that would work just fine as far as, that would make this new version of the page live. If I click switch to draft up here, what that's going to do is take me, that's going to essentially unpublish this page for now until I get it the way I want it to be, or maybe I never will. But I'm going to click this little ... here. Nope, excuse me. That's not the right thing at all, is it? Oh. All right. There we go. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to click this WordPress icon. That'll take me back to the list of pages that are part of my site. It'll ask me if, it'll say I have unsaved changes and ask me, am I sure I want to leave this page? Why, yes, I am. I'll click OK, and the page will go back to the way it was before. Okay, so let's make a new one. I'm going to go over here and click Add New Page. There we go. Okay, so once I do that, I have a few different options here. Actually, a very large array of options, apparently. So what this is the various layouts that you can work with. So there are different layouts here for about pages. Oh, something strange happened. Okay. Nope. Okay, my little deal just collapsed itself for some reason. So you have various layouts here that you can use. Layouts for an about page, layouts for blog pages, layouts for contact pages, and so on and so forth. But I do want us to actually start from scratch so that we can see what we want to do. So if you choose one of these layouts, basically some things are going to be pre-set up for you, and you can basically just replace the content. But let's start instead with the blank layout. So I'll click up here, and oh, that one just takes me to it. I'll click Use Blank Layout in the corner, and there we go. Let's see. Okay, someone had a question. Where was the Add New Page button? Take you back there really quick. So the Add New Page. So over here under the My Site or My Sites menu on the left, you'll want to click on Site to see the list of pages, and then you'll click Add New Page over here. All right. I'll use the blank layout. And there we go. Okay, cool. So I've got my blank page here. And what I want to do, I'm going to go into some detail here because the editor is a place that you're going to spend a lot of time while you're working on your site. This is where you put most of the content onto your site, is in the editor. So so we're going to be pretty detailed with this portion of things. But we're not going to go into absolutely everything. If I try to show you all the different types of blocks, like that would be quite a challenge. So I don't want everybody to get bogged down, but I do want to show you the most important stuff, and we're going to focus in on some of that here in the editor. Okay, so first things first, up here at the top, I have this area that says Add Title. So I need to give my page a title, and I'll just call it New Page, honestly, because this is an example, and I want to make sure I don't get it mixed up with anything else. Okay, then down here it says Start Writing or type / to choose a block. So let's see. Okay, someone else asked a question here. For some reason, I can't see the questions super well. So let me.
They're kind of small, but it's Lavana asking, how do I undo a theme to go back to a blank page?
So basically, if you've just chosen the layout, or template for this page. As long as you haven't made any changes, well, even if you have, you can just click the little WordPress icon up in the corner, and that'll take you back to the list of pages. And then you can click Add New Page again, and this time just choose the blank layout. Cool. So I've given my page a title, and that's going to be what will show up here at the top of my screen, or of my visitors' web browsers as they're, when they visit my site and that particular page. And then down here, I can click. And if I just wanted to start going straight away with some text, then I could do that just by clicking down here and starting to type. Okay, cool. So I've got something in there, and you'll notice because I just started typing right away, I've got this little paragraph symbol up here, at the top when I move my mouse up, the paragraph symbol. Then I've got my, and then I have some options here for formatting my paragraph. So what I need to do, so I can, well, let me actually show you a few of those options. You have your alignment right here. A lot of this stuff will be familiar to you if you've used Microsoft Word or written an email before, so I'm not going to really belabor this, but I do want to show you just briefly. So I can change my text alignment by clicking this button here and center my text if I want to, or align it along the right-hand margin rather than the left, which of course is the default. I have bold and italics right here, so if I select some text and I choose one of these buttons, then it will change that text accordingly or change it back if it's already been changed. If I hit one of those buttons and I don't have any text selected with my mouse, then it's going to use that style until I turn it off. And italics, the same deal. I can insert a link as well, and that's a pretty useful thing to have. If I want to say turn these two words, great information, into a link somewhere else, I can highlight them with my mouse. So I hold down on the mouse button and drag over until the text is selected. Then I'm going to click this link button right here that looks like a little set of chain links. And then it says search or type URL. So what it means by that is if I want to link to another page on my website, for instance, the home page, I can type that in and I can click on either of these. Now the difference here is this is set up as a URL, so it's assuming that that is an actual address, just the word home, and that's not accurate. That won't take you anywhere. So this is not the best option to choose. Instead, I need to go here where it says home, has the address of my home page, and then it says page. If I click on that, that's going to take folks to my website's home page. And even if I change something about it, like the title of the page, that sort of thing, it's going to still link directly to that page. I'm going to click edit there. I do have one other option here. So yeah, as you start typing this, it'll do, if you start typing something that's not a web address, it will do a search of all the content on your site and hopefully give you the correct page pretty easily there. Okay, so we've got that. I'll choose this, and then I have the option if I want to click on to turn this little switch on that says open in new tab. Generally speaking, if I'm linking to sites that are or pages that are inside of my website, then I probably wouldn't use this option. the time, times where I would want it to open in a new tab would probably be if I was linking to some outside page, or for instance, if I were giving a link to some other information that I found on some other site that as a reference. So you can say, I found such and such information here, and that's a link. The reason being, if you don't open that in a new tab, what's going to happen is instead people will, essentially as soon as they click that link, people will be leaving your site to go wherever the link takes them. So that's how you create a link. Super duper easy, thankfully. Next to that, I can hit this drop down arrow, and I have a bunch of additional options here that we're not going to go through, and we're not going to go through all of them. I'll just say some of the ones that are perhaps might be a little more confusing. Inline code and inline image. For those two things, what's going to happen is inline code gives you the opportunity to put in some text that essentially will be that will have no formatting associated with it. So no font, no font information, no text size information, no color information, that sort of thing, which makes it really useful for copying and pasting in certain places where that kind of information is at best not terribly useful, and at worst possibly will interfere with what you need. So if it's something that you want people to be able to copy and paste really easily, then you want to format it as code. And in fact, there's a whole block. If you have several lines of things that you want people to be able to copy and paste, there's a whole block that's specifically a code text block that you can drop in your page as well. But if it's just one thing, like say a password or something like that, then this inline one is a good option. It'll just put the text there in the middle of your paragraph, and then once you turn it off, you can keep going with your text in its regular style. Inline image is similar. If I were, say, writing a tutorial and saying, click the OK button to move on, then rather than just say the OK button in words, I can actually put an inline image of the button there. So I could say click the, and then there's a picture of the OK button to move on. So that can be useful, but it's not the best way to do images in most circumstances. Justify is also really nice. That will align your text. It'll adjust the spacing between your words so that the text is aligned between both your left margin and your right margin. And that gives you a nice clean look. The only time it doesn't align against both margins is the last line of each paragraph, so that you can still tell visually, like, oh, okay, that's where the paragraph ends and then this paragraph begins down there. Cool. If I click this ... at the end here, then I have a bunch of additional options here. I can copy a block, I can duplicate it, I can insert a block before this one or after it. I can edit it as HTML if you're familiar with HTML at all. I can also, if there's a piece of content that I use very regularly, say a paragraph that I use verbatim all the time, or any number of things, honestly, I can save it as what's called a reusable block, so that that way, for any page or any post on my entire site, I can just go to my reusable blocks and grab it and drop it in there and make whatever adjustments I need to. So that could be really helpful if there's some content that you reuse regularly. I can group blocks together so that I can move them together, and I can remove this one as well if I'm like, I don't need that paragraph anymore. Okay, so I'm gonna press, so I just pressed enter at the end of that paragraph, and it moved me down to the next line, but it's also it's also actually created a new paragraph block, because like I said, anytime you have a paragraph, each paragraph should have its own separate paragraph block. So I've got that there, but now I actually want it to be something different. So I am going to hit the, excuse me, the slash key there, which will allow me to choose the kind of block that I want in this spot. So let's go with a heading block. So now I've changed that over to a heading block, and now I have a somewhat different set of options here. The first one you'll notice is this H2 right here, change heading level. If I click on that, I can choose the kind of heading I want. Now this is kind of important, so I want to make sure that I highlight this for you. Whenever you look at a web page online, you'll notice a lot of times it has little headers, little subheadings inside of the page itself, and then your regular body text. A lot of times if you look at, if you're looking through an article, you'll have different sections that are called out by a header. When they do that, they don't just turn the text size up like you might in Microsoft Word or something like that, although it's not best to do it in Word either. That way, they don't just turn the text size up. What they do instead is they actually mark that particular piece of text as a header. The reason that that's useful is that when your text is marked as a header, you can, it makes it, number one, it makes all of your styles look consistent. So your theme probably uses a different font for body text, the regular text of your pages, and header text. So if you mark it as a header in WordPress, WordPress will use the correct font to display that header. And beyond that, if you have a header that's, if you have your text size, and also the other big thing about this is being consistent and being consistent in your use of headers allows search engines to understand the content of your page a little bit better. And so you're more likely to rank higher on search results than you are if you just use a continuous block of paragraph, 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 paragraph. So headers definitely recommended, and you do want to use them consistently. So H1, which is not one of the options in the list here, H1 is actually reserved for the titles of your pages in WordPress. And so, so you won't see H1 in this list. H2 is essentially the second level heading or the subheading. And so if you use, and so choosing H2 means this is one of the bigger sections in your page. H3 means essentially it's a subsection of an H2 section. And then H4 basically means this is a subsection. So you want to use that consistently, make sure it makes sense logically, and that'll and you'll go pretty far. Most of the rest of the options here actually are pretty similar to the paragraph block. Let's see. Okay. The other thing I want to point out, though, now that I have my heading here, is over on the side, on this sidebar on the right. What you've got over here is a different set, or is another set of controls that you can use to tweak your, in this case, my heading block. So there's typography. I can change the default size from what it normally is for this type of header to some other size if I really want to. I can choose like from these sort of settings, small, medium, large, huge, etc. Or I can choose a custom size, like a point size, like you do in something like Word. You can also choose the line height here, so essentially how much headroom I'm going to get above my header whenever I insert it there. There should be kind of more of a gap between this paragraph up here before the header and the header itself than there is between, you know, two paragraph blocks by themselves. Color settings, I can change the color of the text, or I could even change the background color behind. Oop, forgot I clicked back in the paragraph block there. So I can change the color of the text, or I can even change the background color behind my header like that. You know, be mindful of that. Don't go crazy with it. Honestly, I tend to avoid making these sorts of customizations, because what it does more often than not is it makes that particular bit of content stick out like a sore thumb from the rest of your theme. So I would tend to avoid that. I would also tend to avoid this, honestly, changing the size of the text in the header. I would just leave it as the default. If I want to change the size, I can change the heading level, and that will usually tweak it a little bit. It doesn't change it super noticeably, at least not on this page, but it does a little bit. The text gets slightly smaller, you'll notice, as I move down from H2 to H3 to H4. Let's see, there was a question over here. Let me take a look. Can I only link to web addresses, or can I link to PDFs? You can link to pretty much whatever you want, as long as it's something that's online. If you, we'll talk a little bit more about the media management here in a few, but basically you'll upload a PDF just like you would almost any other file, like an image or an audio file or whatever the case may be. And then in order to download it, you can create a link to it if you want to. Now, I will say, if you have a lot of content in PDFs, like, okay, I've seen situations where people try to use a Word document or a PDF that they already have created as marketing materials. They try to just like link to it or display that content on their website, or say, like, you know, download this PDF to learn more. That's not a good strategy. Your website is pretty important as a marketing tool, and if there's marketing information that you want to give people, you want to give it to them in a web page, not as a separate file that they have to download and open, potentially with a separate program on their computer even. If, however, you have a document that's like kind of a long legal document or an order form, or if you've got, you know, for instance, on our website at the library, I normally have calendars prepared that are like, that show when each of my classes are happening and where they're happening, and so, you know, what each class is. So things like that are like something that people might want to download and print. I mean, I say that, something that people really might want to download and print, not like your marketing materials. They don't want to download and print those unless they're going to come and talk to you about specific points of it. So something that people might actually want to download and print, that's really what you're looking for with a with something that you do as a separate document, like a PDF or a Word document. Beyond that, you know, you probably, more often than not, you'll probably be better served to start replicating the content of the PDF onto, you know, as a web page on your site, rather than making it something you can download separately. But yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to click down here underneath my heading, This time I'm going to click this little plus sign right here. And that's actually when I hit my / key earlier, it gave me a selection of very commonly used blocks that I could that I could insert into my page. But now I'm gonna go down a little further and just show you the variety of blocks that you can use. Things are notable. There's, let's see, we talked about paragraph and heading. There's a page break option here. If you have a long article that needs to be broken down into multiple pages, then inserting that page break block will say page 1 ends here, and and then page 2 starts after it. That's useful sometimes. You've got your image and gallery, which we're going to be using in just a moment. A list, if you want a numbered list or bulleted list of items, then there's that. You can create kind of a block quote or pull quote with this quote block. There's an audio player. You upload an audio file, and there's a little player there so people can just hit the play button and listen to your audio file. Excuse me. And then there's the cover block. Cover block's pretty cool. We may go back. I'm going to start with kind of what we have and a little bit more, and we may go back and add this cover block here in a sec, just depending on how things look with my theme that I'm using. Down here under new, there are some other ones here that are looks like some of them kind of connect with paid services and so forth, but you can drop some stuff in there. There's a file block where you can sort of feature a file for download, so that might be useful with the whole PDF thing. There's formatting, so things like Markdown. Essentially, that's a way that you can use that you can type plain text but have it show up in a stylized way. It's kind of cool. There's a code block, like I mentioned before, where you can have unstyled code without a font or a size or a color, that sort of thing, for easy copying and pasting. And classic, you can even insert essentially a version of the old classic WordPress editor as a block into your page if you want. You can do a table, verse. Not 100% sure. Never been 100% sure what kind of verse they're talking about here. A verse of this song verse, a Bible verse. I don't know. Layout elements, so things like how we had the layout grid that we saw on the other about page, and essentially that's there's a columns block you can use. Of course, you can group stuff together. You can create a carousel of posts, so you can see like essentially like a set of featured posts on your blog. You can insert that right into one of your pages or posts. A tiled gallery, kind of Pinterest style image gallery. Collage, a little separator, the more block, which we'll talk about when we do a blog post here in a few. A spacer, so if you find your things are just slightly off, you can insert one of those spacers. Widgets, so widgets are little sort of mini pieces of reusable content that you can use all around your site. We'll talk about widgets a little bit next week when we talk about the customizer. And then embeds, which we'll get to in just a moment. And then down here at the bottom are some extra types of blocks that you can add in specifically because we're using WordPress.com. So I'm not going to focus on these because they are WordPress.com specific, or at least they require you to install this extra plugin from WordPress.com called Jetpack, which is as far as I can tell, a Swiss Army knife plugin. It does a bunch of different things that seem essentially random to me, but those will but that's where those come from. And there are some with another plugin that's built into your WordPress.com one called CoBlocks. Someone else says, can you insert tables and modify the columns and rows? I haven't worked extensively with the table block. I mean, you can insert a table for sure with the tables block. Yeah, let's give it a go, see what happens. Okay, there it is, table block. Okay, so we've got our column count and our row count here, so I can figure out exactly how many items and how many columns. I'll just go with the 3 by 5. That's a good size. Okay, now I've got my table here, and looks like it's adjusting the size of my columns sort of dynamically as I go, based on the information that's in there. Let's see. So I can align my text inside of the cells. Okay, that's adding and removing rows and columns. Oh, I see. This is the alignment of the table in relation to the page itself. So I guess the answer to the question is mostly yes. So you can insert a table. You can even have a little caption at the bottom and whatnot. You can add and remove columns and rows as you see fit, but it looks like it is going to, oh, wait, hang on. We've got more settings over here. Let's see. Okay, so you've got a few different styles you can choose from. Fixed width table cells. So fixed width table cells, that's probably going to be, okay, cool. So I can have a header section, footer section. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I can lock my tables to be essentially like matching column widths, but it doesn't look like I can modify the column widths or the row heights manually. Looks like it's all around the actual content that's inside of my table. Let's see.
Patricia says she lost where you found the menu you're looking at now, and she's also been trying to find it, and she keeps losing the page she's working on, and she says she's seriously lost. Is there a quick way to close the options to get back to where she needs to be there?
Close the options. So is she still in the editor? That's I guess that's the big question, because if you're not seeing this, like the editor where you have the title of the page and possibly the sidebar over here, possibly not, then what you'll want to do is click My Site and go down to Site and Pages, and then click Add New Page, and that'll kind of get you somewhat to where we need to be. If you're in the editor and you're losing and your work is disappearing for some reason, I'm not sure exactly why that would be happening. You might go up here and hit undo up at the left, or even just use Control-Z on your keyboard. One thing that can happen, if you click outside of the text area here, if basically, so right now I've got the little blinking cursor here, but if I click somewhere else outside of that, then one possible thing that could be happening, and and this might happen if you're working on a touchpad. Sometimes if you reach for the keyboard on a touchpad, your palm will kind of brush the touchpad, as your hand moves up to the keyboard. So you might watch out for that. But if you click somewhere else outside of the touchpad, and you If you click somewhere else outside of this and you don't have the little blinking cursor on the page anymore, then hitting backspace on your keyboard is going to take you back a page in your web browser. So that's going to navigate you away from the editor that we're working in now. So if you hit backspace, you want to make sure that you actually have the little cursor blinking there inside of the text, because otherwise hitting backspace will just go back a page in your web browser. So that could be a possibility, but let me know if you're still running into problems, and we'll figure it out. Let's move down and let's add another block though. Excuse me. So to add another block, what I'm doing is I'm clicking this little plus button over here on the side. You can also add blocks in between others by essentially moving over the center of things and clicking, and that will be that'll sort of show that should show this little plus sign button in between, so you can insert a block in between two other ones. So I'm clicking the plus sign over here, and I'll head down. What I want to find is the gallery block this time. Oh, by the way, you can also, up at the top here, search in this box, so you can start typing something and get to it that way. All right, so I've got my gallery block, and what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to upload some images. So I can click upload here, and that's going to open up the file browser here on my computer. And then I'm going to head to now this is where, if you were able to find those images, as I suggested for the optional homework yesterday, if you were able to find some of those images, this is where you'll browse your computer and find those images. If you haven't done anything else with them, they're probably in your downloads folder over on the left here. For me, my stuff is in my WordPress folder here. All right. So I'm going to grab some, there's a cat out the window there. I'm going to grab some pictures. And if you want to select multiple pictures, you can do that too. If you have them all together in a group, you can take your mouse and drag like this. That works on pretty much any computer. If you're on a Windows computer, you can click the first one that you want to select, and you can hold down Control, CTRL, in the bottom corner of your keyboard, and click the other images that you want to use as well. So that'll select multiple, and you can get all of them at once. So I've got 5 there, that's good. I'll click Open. And now those images are uploading, and that's going to create my gallery. Okay, let's see. Oh, I can pop that out. That's nice. Okay. Okay, so a couple of, okay, it says I'm offline, but that does not seem to be the case. Okay, cool. So I did get a couple of additional questions here while that's doing its thing, and while y'all's images are potentially uploading as well. One of the questions I got are the changes that we're making save as we go, or do we need to click a save button somewhere if I need to exit? Okay, so with that, yes, you do need to save manually when you're working here. Now, if you try to leave the page and you have unsaved changes, WordPress will usually prompt you well, it'll tell your web browser to prompt you that like you might have unsaved changes, and it'll give you the option to cancel moving, navigating away from the page. But in order to save your changes, you're going to go up here to the top and click Save Draft. And that will save your page as a draft. That won't publish your work. But if you're working with a page that's already been published, the only thing you can do, unfortunately, is to update the live page with the changes that you've made. So if you're going to make changes to an existing page, you want to have some time blocked out so you can do it all at once. You can't make changes to an existing page and keep the old version uploaded. I can't sit down and make half the changes I want to make to my home page today and then half the changes I want to make tomorrow, because the only way to do that would be for me to save the page half finished and have the half finished version be live to my audience for overnight, and then come back and make the other changes and then publish the fully finished version. So that's a limitation of WordPress. It's frustrating. I don't know why they haven't fixed it, but they haven't. Okay, so there's that one. Okay, someone says, with a bulleted list of links, how do you give sensible names to links and not show the cryptic URLs? And the answer that was given, which is basically my answer, make a bulleted list of text, select the text, and turn it into a link. You'll have the option to do that at the top of your list, block with a link button up here, just like you do at the top of a paragraph block. Cool. Okay, someone says, can you talk about the best format for images? When should I use PNG, when JPEG, other formats? So basically you should use PNG and JPEG because most of the other image formats that are out there are not super duper well supported, I would say. I mean, there are other ones that some websites use, but honestly, PNG and JPEG are probably the best options. And specifically, what I would say is, if you need an image that has a transparent background or some sort of transparent element, you should use a PNG image, because that's going to because then you can see, then you'll be able to see the background through that image. So for example, with a logo, things like that, usually they're not exactly square or exactly circular, that sort of thing. So a PNG image is best for that because it supports having transparent areas of the image. For everything else, you want to use a JPEG because they load faster. And whether your website loads quickly or not is like a huge deal, particularly since a lot of times folks are accessing your website on their mobile device. They may or may not have a very fast connection, and so you want to be nice to them. So use the JPEG. Use the JPEGs for something that, for anything that needs transparency, or for anything that doesn't need transparency for the majority of your images, and use the PNG when you specifically need something that with a transparent area. Cool. Okay, so I've got my images uploaded here in my gallery, and I can click on them. I can use these little arrow buttons to move them around if I want to. I can hit the little X to remove, to remove an image if I decide I don't want it in my gallery. I can go up here to the top, change how my gallery is aligned with relation to the rest of the page, and I have all my basic settings here, and so on and so forth. Now that I've got them uploaded, I can also reuse these images anytime I need to, in basically whatever context I need to throughout my site, because they're stored in my media library. if I go down here and I click Media Library just below the gallery, then I can see all the images that are stored on my site. So in this case, I have the 4 that I just uploaded, and I have this picture of the mountains and the picture of the person here that are, that were example content that came with my site. But I'm looking now at my media library here, and I've got a bunch of other. If you look up at the top here, I have some other tabs that I can click on. There's all. That's going to show me all the media that's, I guess I can't click on any of them now, probably because they're not there. There's nothing there. That's going to show me all the media that's been uploaded to my site, regardless of what it is. Images, of course, will show me just the images specifically. Documents is going to show me things like PDF files or other types of documents that I've uploaded to my site for people to download or to view online. Videos, if I've uploaded videos. Now, if you're using the free version of WordPress.com, you can't upload your own videos, which is why I'm about to show you how to embed content. But you can't upload your own videos because, frankly, you don't have a whole lot of space to be going with anyway. So it's not going to really, so it wouldn't be really practical to upload the videos. And also because if you upload videos directly to your site, then whenever someone wants to watch the video, your WordPress.com has to transmit that entire video to your visitor. And so that uses a lot of their, what we call bandwidth, basically the amount of pipe space to send stuff to and from site visitors. And so you have to pay for it if you want to host videos on your site. But again, you can host videos elsewhere, and then you can display them on your site, which I'll show you in a moment. And of course, you can upload audio files. If I wanted to go ahead and throw in this picture of the mountains, I'll click on that to add it to my gallery, and I'll click Insert. And now that's in there as well. So now I have a nice little media gallery going here. I can come over here and I can change my settings if I want to. But let me show you the other settings over here on the side before we, let's go ahead and do the embed, and then we'll talk about these settings before we publish. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to click the Add Block button one more time. And this time I'm going to do a little search up at the top for YouTube. And sure enough, there it is. I'll click on that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the address of my YouTube video that I found, the homework from last time, and I'm going to paste that address in there. So give me just a moment. Let me go ahead and pull that up. Okay, cool. So just to make things super easy, I've pulled up one of my own videos from YouTube here. Now that I've got it, open in a tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this address up at the top, known as the URL. When someone says URL, that's just the fancy way of saying the address of a particular website. So I'm going to grab that address at the top. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to come back over here and paste it into this blank. And then I'll click Embed. Now that I've got that, you can see it shows up just as though I was looking at the video on YouTube. And I'll be able to see it there. So what am I doing here exactly? One thing I'm specifically not doing, because I'm using the free version of WordPress, is I'm not uploading a copy of this video to my website. So if I were to go back and try to share or let's say that I went to the YouTube channel and I pulled this video down at some point in the future. If that were to happen, even though this page has been published, in the future, the next person who tries to load the page is going to see essentially a little placeholder here that says this video is no longer available. Because the video itself still lives on YouTube servers, not on the WordPress.com servers in my website. That also means it doesn't take up any storage space on my website. And that also means that rather than having to worry about how fast the connection is from WordPress.com, I can instead, my visitors are going to be streaming the video directly from the YouTube servers. The YouTube servers are super duper fast because they're streaming like gazillions of minutes of video every day to millions and millions of people. And so I basically know that it's going to be there. If that's your video, then you pretty much have control over it. So if you want to add your own video content to your website, that's pretty much the best way to do it. Upload it to your YouTube account or your Vimeo account or whatever, and then embed the content here on your page. And that way folks can access it from your website, but you're not having to store all those videos in your storage on your site. If it's somebody else's videos, that's okay too. In fact, any video that can show up here is perfectly fine to use on your site. So you can find a video anywhere on YouTube and you can drop it right in there. As long as it shows up in this way, then it's fine for you to display on your site, because there's a setting that you can tweak when you upload a video to YouTube, where you can say, yes, I'm okay with this video being embedded, or no, I'm not okay with it being embedded. If you turn off, and if somebody turns off embedding, then their video can't be displayed like this one is on anybody else's website. It will only be viewable on YouTube. If you turn, as long as embedding is left on though, then you're essentially, the owner of that video is implicitly giving you permission to display the video on any website you want in all of creation. But again, the double-edged sword. If they pull it down, then the video is also gone from your site. If they make changes to the video later on, the new version of the video is going to show up. So if you're referring to something that happened in the old version of the video and it's no longer there, and the video is no longer like that, then you might end up looking a little silly. For the most part, though, it's going to be fine. And so if you're doing this with your own videos, this is certainly a good way to do it. If you're doing it with other people's videos, even better, honestly, because you're probably not going to have a file that you can upload to your site anyway, if it's somebody else's video. Okay, so we've got all this set up pretty much the way I want it. Let's talk about the settings for the page in general, and then we'll publish it. So up here at the top of the sidebar, we haven't talked about it so far, but you might notice there are two tabs here. There's a block tab and there's a document tab. The block tab is what's been highlighted so far, and that shows the settings for the particular block that you're working in. In this case, it's the YouTube embed block that I'm working with right now. But if I click document over here instead, then it's going to give me settings that are directly related to this specific page. So I'm going to go through these to kind of show you what they do. Visibility is set to public right now. Now, this is not a published page yet, and one of the reasons you can tell is up here at the top, there's a publish button. If this were a published page, that would be an update button instead. because the page has already been published. It just needs to be updated. But in this case, it hasn't been published yet. And we also have a Save Draft button, which tells me this is a draft and not a published page. So the visibility is public, and then it says publish, and then there's immediately here. So if you change the visibility, public is visible to anyone who visits your site. So once you publish this page, everyone can see it. Private, when you publish that page, is still only going to be available to site administrators and editors. So people who have people who you've designated as an administrator or an editor on the site. At this point, most likely it's just you. But you would be able to see the page, no one else would. Or if you have other people you're working with on the site, they'll be able to see it too. And then password protected is exactly what it sounds like. You can publish a page that has a password associated with it, and then you can give out the password to the people who need to have access to the page or who you want to give access to the page to. Publish immediately, if you click on this, it'll give you a date and time picker, and you can choose a specific date and time where the page will go live. Obviously, that's based on the what is the name of that thing? That's based on the time zone settings for your site. Pending review, if you check that box, what's going to happen is basically the page will be sort of marked as being a completed page, but basically you're saying, okay, I think this is done, and then you're asking for some extra help for somebody to look in and check on it really quick. And so that's what that's for. And then move to trash, of course, will, since I've saved this as a draft, it'll basically put that draft page in the trash so that, so that it's canceled and won't hopefully go live. I can change the page layout here if I want to. So there's a page layout option. It's actually another way that you could do what the person was asking about earlier, rather than go back and start from scratch. You could actually click change layout here. You can see the revision history for your page if you want to by clicking on this revisions area. And you can even reload a previous revision of the page, which could be helpful. The permalink option here, let me actually collapse these as we go so that things don't get too cluttered. The permalink option here, this is going to be the address of your page. Now you can't change everything about the address of your page because some parts of it are already specifically set. So this one is Cal's ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com/new-page. That would be the address of this page once I publish it. And what they call the slug here is that last part of the address after the slash. So this is the address of my site, slash, and then the slug. I could change that if I want to. I could just call it new. That'd be fine. And then the address down here changes as well. So if I want to have the title of the page, what comes up as the slug as the default is going to be your that's going to be essentially based on the title that you designate for the page. But you can adjust the slug if you need to or you want to make the address shorter, things like that. Basically, to make it shorter is what it's going to be most of the time. Like, try to keep your URLs short because they're more useful that way. Featured image. This one's super duper 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 important because the featured image is basically the image that's going to hopefully draw your audience in. I'm going to click set featured image, and I'll go ahead and choose I'll choose this one. The little candy bar phone in the grass. Okay, there we go. Now that's been designated. The reason that the featured image is important is because a lot of times when people find a particular web page or a particular site, they find it using social media. And let's see. And so as you probably noticed if you use social media, as you're scrolling through, you probably see a lot more. You probably see like pay a lot more attention to a particular post if it has an image associated with it, rather than just being sort of a blank like link somewhere. Wow, this is okay. Here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay. So if you post a link, if someone posts a link to social media, they can, it'll look something like this. So we've got the name of the person who posted it and when they posted it, and there's all your liking and commenting and so forth. If you're the owner of the site, all of the stuff that's in this little box here, even though it's not you sharing it on social media, all of the stuff that's in this little box here is within your control. So there's the address of the site in general. It's not the specific address of the page, but it is the address of the site in general. Obviously, you have control over that because you're the one buying your domain name. This right here is the title of the page. So in the case of our page that we're building right now, it's called New Page. And so we would see New Page right here. This is called the excerpt, and we'll get to that in a moment. And this over here is the featured image. If you don't set anything as a featured image, then folks who are scrolling through their social media feeds are going to see all of this stuff, but no picture. And so they're probably going to scroll right past the link to your site. So it's super duper important whenever you create a new page or a new post that you always set a featured image, period. So just make sure. All right. So that's featured image. Down here we have the excerpt, and that's what I was talking about a moment ago. Right here we see real estate agents everywhere realizing that social media could possibly be their best marketing, and then it cuts off. Depending on how much space there is on the viewer's screen and what social media platform they're using and so on and so forth, then you have essentially just a few words to grab your potential audience's attention. By default, if you leave this excerpt area blank, what's going to happen is the social media site will just grab the first few words of your page or your post, whatever those might happen to be. If, however, you can you write something in this excerpt area, then usually those sites are going to actually pull out that excerpt instead. And so that gives you an option, or that gives you a chance to grab your audience's attention with some nice punchy copy. So for example, the primary thing that's on this page is a gallery of images of nature and technology. So I've got some animals with technology, I've got a phone line in the grass, I've got this person using their phone outside, etc. So over here, I'm going to write a gallery of images of nature and technology. Not the most scintillating description possible, but this is just an example. You can use something really, really hooky to try and grab your audience's attention. And that way, you're more likely to have folks visit your site and hopefully, use your business. The discussion area here, you can allow comments or not. Since this is a static page, my strong urging to you would be to not allow comments under any circumstances on your static pages, because they're kind of like the front window of your store. You don't really want, you don't really want just people throwing trash there. And so don't allow comments on that. Whether you allow comments on your blog posts or not is kind of a more individual choice. I mean, technically this is too, but just don't do it, y'all. Why would you do that to yourselves? Don't do it. On your static pages, I should say. On your posts, allowing comments can be really helpful to sort of build community potentially, as long as you're willing to spend the time or hire somebody or whatever to police those comments so they don't get too toxic. Okay, page attributes over here. This is the last bit on this sidebar. we have our parent page option, no parent, and then our order. So here's what this does, a couple of things. If you set, right now, this page has no parent page. If I go down here and I set a parent page instead, let's say the About page, for example, then what's going to happen is, well, actually nothing right now with the, probably with the way my site is set up. But depending on how you configure the rest of your site, and I'll show you this setting tomorrow when we talk about the customizer, depending on how you have things set up, you'll see essentially if you designate a parent page, you'll see this as a sub page underneath the current page. So so they'll move their mouse over About, and then New Page will show up in a little submenu underneath it. And then down here is the order. If you choose a different order, then if you already had other items with the same parent, you can choose essentially where in the order of those pages this one will fall. So let's go ahead and publish our page and see what happens. So I've got that. It gives me this double check thing here, the pre-publish check is what it calls it, just to make sure that I do want it to be, the page to be public for everyone, and I do want it to be published immediately rather than going up at a scheduled time. If you don't like this, and to be honest with you, I don't, then you can uncheck this little box. It says always show pre-published checks, and clicking publish will result in it being published immediately. Otherwise, if you prefer to leave it, or to have that sort of check just to make sure before you go live, you can leave that checked. I'll click publish up here again one more time, and now it's live. This right here is a link that'll take me directly to that page. Oh, that's the other thing. Okay, I could have sworn it did that, but then the permalink thing didn't update. So the other thing that designated a parent page does is it changes the page's address a little bit. Before, the address was going to be Cal's ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com/new. Now, because I made the About page the parent, it's Cal's ASBTDC 520.wordpress.com/about/new. So that changes sort of the structure of the page's address or permalink as well. If I click on this, that's going to take me to the page, and now I can see how it's turned out. Looks pretty good, but I do need to change one thing about it. This is kind of what I figured. So right here, I have just the title of the page, and then this scrolls down. Now, I can scroll down and I can see most of the content, but I don't see that featured image. For the featured image, in essentially in older versions of WordPress, or in certain, depending on what theme you're using, you may or may not, or in older themes or older style themes, your featured image shows up at the top of the page, kind of in this area here, or maybe even further up, depending on what theme you're using. But because this is a newer style theme, in order to feature that, in order to show that image to people when they actually visit the page, I need to add that cover block. So I'm going to go down here and click on Edit. And I'll be able to do that anytime that I'm signed into my account while I'm browsing the page. And now I'll come up here. I'm going to click in this paragraph block and click the ... And I'll do insert before. And now I'll click the plus sign over here, and we're going to add the cover block. Okay, so the cover block does is kind of a specific sort of, or is a specific sort of block. What it'll do is it'll show me a big kind of what you might call a hero image at the top, and it'll show the title of the page over the top of it or some other text overlaid on top of it. So first, I'm going to click Media Library to go ahead and grab the image that I want. And I'll insert it there. Okay, now I've got the image, and now I have my little cursor blinking up here. So now I can say, like so. And now I'll click Update. And I can click View Page down here in the corner. By the way, you always have this preview option up here as you're making changes. So when you make changes to your page, you can click Preview, and it'll open a separate tab usually, or oh yeah, a little pop-up box that'll show you how your changes will look before you commit to them live with your audience. And that's pretty much it for that. Okay, so let's see. Someone says my page attributes shows parent page, but also template. What is template? So the template was the thing that we were talking about earlier. Well, I guess it kind of matters. I'm guessing that's dependent on the theme, but mine says page layout. That's the same thing. It's basically like a pre-done arrangement of the content in your post or your page. So, okay, somebody asked, how did I insert the cover block at the top again? What I did was I clicked in the paragraph block that was at the top, like whichever block is at the top, your title is not a block. So make sure you don't click in there, but anything that's below the title should be a block at the top of your page. So I clicked there, and then you've got these little controls up at the top above that block. I clicked the little dot, 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 clicked insert before, and then I clicked the plus sign over here to choose specifically which kind of block I was going to use, in this case, the cover block. You can type it up here if you want to, or you can scroll down until you find it and click it. So if I wanted to there for some reason, I could do that. But I'm going to remove that one. All right, so let me just show you briefly the, that went a little bit longer than I had hoped. I'm not sure why, but let me show you just briefly the differences in the settings for your posts, because that's pretty useful, and then we'll do some other questions, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Okay, so I'm gonna click on the little WordPress icon at the top. I have unsaved changes. Am I sure I want to leave this page? Why, yes, I am. I'll click OK. And then down here underneath where it says Pages on the left-hand side, if you don't see that, click on My Site or My Sites. Click on Site if you need to, and then find Pages and Posts down here. Underneath the Pages option, there's the Posts option, and that gives me a list of the 3 blog posts that were that were added as examples for me. I'm going to click Add New Post and create a new one. Y'all don't necessarily have to follow me on this part because it's, well, excuse me, I'm just going to show you over here on the right-hand side some additional settings, and I'll talk about one special block here. So let me show you the block first. So over here in the body of the post, I have this plus sign where I can add a block. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to scroll down here really quickly until I find the More block right here. The More block is really useful because basically, let's say I had a long blog post that I had written. That's great. Lots of people love like a long, in-depth kind of thing to check out and really sink their teeth into. But depending on the way you have your settings for your blog, if you have a long blog post, and someone is trying to get to a previous post that's older, then as they're browsing through your blog, they're going to have to scroll down through that entire long blog post in order to get to the next the next oldest post. And then if that one's long, they're going to have to scroll through the whole thing of that one, et cetera, et cetera. So what this allows you to do is the more block allows you to set essentially a little break point, usually after the first paragraph or so, depending on what you're doing. And then as people are scrolling through the list of posts on your blog, then they can read that first paragraph or two, and if they're interested in reading the rest of it, they can click a little link that says read more or continue reading, something like that. And then it will take them to the page where the full blog post appears and they can read it. And it'll actually even scroll them down to the spot where they stopped, so they don't even have to find their place necessarily. That can be really useful because it's, it gives them, it gives you a way to kind of make things easy on the people who aren't necessarily looking for that post, who might be looking for a post that's further down the page, and to make it pretty easy on people who start reading a post as they're scrolling through your list of blog posts and go, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to read more of that. They can just click they can do one click and they're good to go. So that's specific to the blog though, because obviously for other pages, you're not going to be scrolling through a long list. Folks are not going to be scrolling through a long list of all the pages on your site, just your blog posts potentially. So other things that are different about a blog post, you have a checkbox here that says, so when I click the document tab up here at the top of the sidebar, you have a checkbox that says stick to the top of the blog. That's going to make that post sticky. So normally your blog posts are arranged in reverse chronological order. The very newest post at the top, the second to newest post below that, the third to newest post below that, and so forth. Checking this box in, when you publish your post, or if you go back and update it and check the box, checking that box will allow you to say, I want this post at the top, regardless of how old the posts around it are. That way, if you have something important, like say, the rules for commenting on the blog or different things like that, that might be relevant, or if you're or if you're trying to highlight a specific post for a specific length of time. Let's say all the sales in your store for the month of May, you can stick that post at the top, and then that way people will see it first thing. And then once May is over, you can go in and uncheck that box, and then it'll go back to its regular position in the list of blog posts. So that's really useful. You can stick certain posts at the top if you want your audience to, if you want to make sure your audience is likely to see them. Categories and tags are the other big thing here. So categories, basically the way that they work is you can essentially, you can have big overarching categories, kind of similar to if you, if you walk into, say, a bookstore, you've got like the humor section over here, and you have the sci-fi and fantasy over here, and you have, the regular nonfiction over here, and you have the kids' books over there, and so on. So you can categorize your posts in that way. And in fact, you can have categories and subcategories and even subcategories, so that people can drill down to exactly the kind of post they want. It's probably not super, you don't want to go way overboard with this. Having just a few categories is probably a good way to go, unless you're very prolific with your blog, because that way, if you have just a few categories, people can drill down to a category they're interested in, and there'll be a fair amount of content there. And things can be considered to be in multiple categories, but that way folks can kind of browse your blog posts by that, rather than necessarily just by the date that they were posted. The tags here work in a similar way. They're another way of categorizing your posts, but instead of having sort of a hierarchy of, you know, big general category, smaller, more specific category, even smaller, even more specific category. Instead, tags are just different attributes that your post has. For example, if you tend to say you have a blog where sometimes you do, you write little essays, and sometimes you post photos, and sometimes you have sort of like news options. Let's say you write an essay, but it has a bunch of photos in it. Well, you can tag that particular post with both the essay tag and the photos tag. Whereas, you know, if you were choosing a category, if you had to choose one, you would probably just choose the essay category, since the photos are a kind of an add-on to the essay to a certain extent. And you can also, you know, and you can also call out specific attributes that the tag has, or even specific topics that are discussed. For example, if you post frequently about movies, then you could have a movies tag. You may not have a movies category, but if you happen to mention movies or, you know, in your post, that sort of thing, you can just add the tag there. And that way somebody can search by the tag in various ways. We'll talk about widgets they might use for that tomorrow. And that way they can find things that go along with that tag. So that's pretty much it. We don't have any sort of homework type situation this time, so just bring yourselves for tomorrow's session. And I'm happy to tackle any outstanding questions we have at this point.
All right, thank you, Nathan. Before we go into the Q&A, we're a little over time, so I'm gonna go ahead and close out the video recording, but I'll leave the system up so we can do a Q&A real quick. So I'm gonna change the screen here very, very quickly. And then,
cool.
Then we'll bring it back to you. All right. So again, let's make sure we're supposed to be here. Okay. So this is being brought to you by the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center. That is our contact info. We're being monitoring those 24/7 lately. And we're a partnership with the U.S. Small Business Administration. We partner with 6 additional universities in the state, providing 8 points of contact, covering all 75 counties. So if you need some assistance with your business, doesn't have to be WordPress, but we're available to help you out there.